Good evening, class. I'm going to spend just a few minutes. I know you've got a quiz coming up, and I thought I'd spend just a few minutes just reviewing, I guess, a few of the topics that I think you need to make sure you're familiar with as you go through your quiz, and it should be chapters 7, 8, 9. So if you remember in the over the last 3 weeks or three chapters, we've talked about things like feedback orientations, and there's the avoidance, there's the performance proof, there's the learning, and I think most of us have either been involved with individuals that fall into one of these categories, or hopefully that everybody on this, watching this video, um, is a leader that when it comes to seeking and receiving and giving feedback falls more in that learning type of orientation than other than the first two. But there's a lot of context and a lot of things that drive that. So I think it's going to change from one time to the next. We also talked about communication media. There's face to face, there's phone, there's chat, there's Zoom and Teams, there's email, there's text. And the authors go through and they talk about which media is best for different situations. So to me, if it's a critical if situation, if it's an individual that may not have been working with you for a very long time, the I guess the topic of discussion could have negative connotations, may not be well received by the individual that you're providing feedback to, then face to face is the best. Phone is not bad. If you can't do face to face, I'd probably use either phone or Zoom or Teams, one of those types. If it's going to be in that negative, critical connotation, I wouldn't use email. I wouldn't use text. I wouldn't use chat. I tend to keep, chat, email and text, especially for those individuals that, maybe I've worked with for a long time, or maybe have a really good relationship with, or we're all on the same page when it comes to vision and strategy and the values that we all share. So I think that as you go through the communication media, just stop and think about some of those things along the way. Um, Evaluations, I've always been, fairly successful in my, process of evaluations. And I always try to start with, something positive. Um, Always, talk about, rather than talking about the negative aspects, I always try to think about, or talk about opportunities for improvement, some great opportunities to help individuals either succeed in their goals, or if they're trying to climb the corporate ladder, to help them to be better leaders. And then, also, I like to have goals, and I find that evaluations go easier if goals are specific. I talk about black and white, talk about binary, talk about measurable. And I like the format where you've got a goal for meets, and goal for exceeds, and a goal, a stretch goal that gives them something to really push for. And it kind of helps you as a leader get to the point that you can, in a definitive way, determine who your rock stars are within your team. And then also when they're talking about evaluations, or I guess just meetings with individuals that you have to, some of your followers, or maybe even some of your supervisors that you report to, try not to go, the route of judgments and attributions. They're typically negative. It can end up with knee-jerk reactions. People don't like to be judged. My, experience, it gets defensive in a hurry. So that's why I like to start out with something positive and then jump into kind of the realm of here's some opportunities for improvement. And then they talk about, the text goes into, putting together teams, whether they're short-term teams, whether they're long-term teams. To me, it's I'm not sure I've ever followed their number of formats or the number of levels that they have. But the key steps, not only in forming your team, but to kind of go back to the evaluation. As you go down through the evaluation, you have to follow that evaluation up, especially if an individual is struggling to meet goals, or they're struggling just to fit in. They're the key steps in coaching. Coaching, follow up. Performance improvement plans if you have to go that route. And the key steps in coaching, develop and communicate goals. That's extremely important. You want to be able to collect data. You want to be able to analyze data. And really important in the analytical aspect of the analytical step, you want to be able to identify gaps and be able to communicate those gaps with the individuals that you're talking to. Feedback, advice, encouragement, especially encouragement. And then the coaching actions, you want to be able to coach. You want to have some timelines that everybody agrees upon. And you want the individual that you're working with to acknowledge that, there are some issues, and here's what, they are going to do to help resolve the issues. And then they kind of finish up that chapter. I guess this may have been chapter 6 with, 360 feedback. And if you've never been through a 360 feedback, and, I've worked for multiple companies that have used it, you're kind of in the middle, and you've got your superiors up here at the top. You've got, peers over here, and, maybe customers over here, and subordinates. You can kind of take and arrange the 4 groups of individuals, but typically either you provide names of individuals for the 360 feedback, or HR will grab those individuals, without, a lot of input from you. And, my issues with 360 feedback is, you end up with sometimes some bad attitudes. I haven't had anybody that I've worked for that had the 360 feedback. I've never had much, follow up, not a whole lot of coaching, not a lot of mentoring. The recipients, must take steps to improve. And a lot of times the recipients just don't want to. And sometimes I've even had individuals that, they thought the feedback, especially from customers and clients, or their peers, or their subordinates, a lot of times they view that as it's just not accurate, and it's not relevant. It's not worth their time to have to listen to it. So I'm not sure that I'm all that great a proponent of 360 feedback, but and I think it's going to depend on the context of the company you work in, maybe the industry you work in, because it does have some benefits as long as it's managed properly. And then again, when you're setting up goals, you want to have goals that again, I'll go back through it, and I know I repeat this a lot, but to me it's extremely important when you've got goals. You want something that's definitive and concise, and something that's measurable, something black and white. You want it to be data-driven metrics, percentages, numbers, timelines. You don't want a goal that says, well, we're going to improve customer service this year. We're going to do better in payment integrity. Our medical management policies are going to improve. What kind of goal is that? You need to put some metrics on there that you can measure, and the metrics that you can actually defend when you're sitting down and having that evaluation with an individual. And again, to me, it goes back to meets, exceeds, stretch. And I kind of skip around a little, but now I'm going to get back into kind of building the teams and, team leadership. And the authors go into the in group versus the out group. And, we talked about the in group and the out group in one of the earlier chapters. And the issues when you're building a team, especially, you'd rather not have a team with out group individuals on it. But if you do, you have to worry about fairness. You have to worry about the perception of fairness from those individuals that, especially if they're individuals in the in-group. You have to worry about the free ride. You have to worry about the social loafing, which they go into detail in the text about that. And if you end up with some out-group individuals, you might have issues with efficiency and effectiveness and productivity and actually meeting the overall goal. So you as a team leader, when you're building these teams, you have to be really careful about how you pull these teams together and how you reach out and grab resources and what expertise you need. And you don't want to end up in kind of a group think situation, but at the same time, you don't want to end up with a group of individuals that can't coexist and can't work together to get from point A to point B and achieve that ultimate goal. And then they spend a fair amount of time talking about team illness, and I've never heard it approached quite this way, but they their concepts of team illness is back to the group think and the free rider and the social loafing. And as a leader, you really have to take responsibility for that. And if you see it happening, you have to nip that in the bud right now, because it's going to definitely, whether it's group think or whether it's free rider or social loafing, it could definitely impact the productivity and the efficiency of the team that you're trying to pull together and manage. And then they spend a few minutes talking about kind of these levels or steps of team development. You've got forming and storming and norming and performing. I mean, really some kind of catchphrases, which I think we've all been through these, steps or levels, maybe not with these specific names, or specific categories. But at the end of the day, I think we've all been there, done that. And again, these are academics and they're trying to put a little different spin on it. The concepts they're bringing forward, make a lot of sense. And I think they're good concepts. It's just I would have probably approached it a little differently. And also they don't get in. I spend a lot of time talking about the adjournment. Once, especially if it's a short term, once that special project's done, once that grant's written and it's out the door, you want to step back and bring your group together one last time before you adjourn and talk about steps that you could have done better or lessons learned, because this may not be the first time you as a leader are pulled into these kind of teams. And especially as a leader, you need to get feedback and input from everybody on the team to see if the next time you're brought in, is there something you could do better? And then they jump into the part about the glass ceiling and the glass cliff, and I see where they're going. They are more talking about women versus men. I think it should have been expanded. And I think I see a lot of individuals that either have a problem making their way up the corporate ladder because of gender, race, ethnicity. So to me, it's not just females. There are a lot of individuals in that situation, or a lot of different types of individuals. And I've also seen individuals that end up getting those positions, and the next thing you know, they're just an abject failure. They don't have the expertise. They've been promoted into those positions. Maybe it's to fill some kind of internal HR quota or something, but you don't ever want to put somebody in a position where they don't have the expertise or the experience or the buy-in from the individuals they're going to be managing to be a success. That's not fair to the individual at that point. And then they talk about a few minutes talking about reverse discrimination, and it's always an issue, especially in the text talks about when a female is promoted over a male, and I can understand. I've seen that a lot. I've also seen the issues where it's some other member of a different race or ethnicity or something is reported, and it just reverse discrimination is always there. And I gave an example of the issues I've had in the past, and as long as you can justify it, and as long as you are honest, and if you have the information that notated as you went through the interview process, and you can explain to anybody questioning why you made that decision. Explain it in an intelligent manner, and especially if it's data driven with some examples. I haven't had too much trouble in the past with reverse discrimination, and I've had some complaints, brought against me for reverse discrimination, but I've always been able to rationalize with not only the HR team, but with the individual that's concerned about, the reverse discrimination. And it's always worked out because I'm very analytical, and I always have, kind of my ducks in a row when I go into those meetings. And as far as reverse discrimination, you get, individuals get defensive. It's a lack of confidence. The individuals who end up with a chip on their shoulder, difficult time leading and influencing. And for when you end up in a situation like that, you had better hope you have a very strong mentor or a very strong advocate if you need help kind of navigating those situations. And then there were a couple of instances where they talk about incongruity, stereotyping, drives failure. You can, get gender, you can get, background, inexperience. Typically you're talking about the incongruity and then stereotyping. I don't want to say it usually results in somebody falling or slipping off the glass cliff, but it certainly can move in that direction. And really, incongruency it almost implies that somebody's incapable, they're out of place, they don't fit, they lack the experience and the expertise. And unfortunately, those can happen. And I've had individuals that have interviewed for a position, and might be an individual that in the company that I'm not very familiar with, and they do a great job on the interview. I mean, they knock it out of the ballpark. I, call our current supervisor, and they get these glowing reviews. But I've learned over the years, when you're in an interview process, it's like you pay your nickel and you take your chances. What is they say? You hope for the best and expect the worst, or something like that. Because I've had some individuals interview great, have glowing recommendations, and they just cannot function once you move them into that position, and you're not really sure why. You talk to them, and you set them down, and you work with them, and at the end of the day, it's you're sometimes just the best thing you can do is help them find another position in the company that better suits their skill set and their needs. And sometimes it's nothing more than just a change of scenery. They just don't have to be a right fit for you. And then they talk about, spend just a few minutes talking about male leaders in diverse environments. And they kind of walk through these three levels of inclusiveness. One was the minimization of differences, one was moderate acceptance, and one was proactive inclusion. And there's always going to be issues with inclusiveness or diversity. It's individuals. Some individuals tend to have a much more difficult time with it than others do, and I'm not sure why, because if you can get the right fit of individuals, diversity is fantastic because you get more creativity, new ideas. They bring a lot to the table. But again, with diversity, as some of the other issues I've run into over the years, sometimes the positives don't outweigh the negatives. Sometimes there are some shortcomings with the diversity, or bringing a highly diverse group together, and sometimes it is extremely difficult for a leader to navigate those types of environment. And that, I think, is all I have as far as the notes I put together. All I can say is, when I reviewed the quiz, it's pretty straightforward. It covers what we've been through in chapter 7, 8, and 9, and hope everybody does well. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.